this is just adding on to what we spoke about now, is that one of the ways in which we respond and can diminish the effect of violence on individuals, and I must just add, the previous speaker spoke about the cost to the economy in terms of somebody who is shot dead. Think about the cost to the economy in terms of productivity lost, just in terms of violence and armed robbery. When a bank is robbed and people are affected by the trauma, they don't want to go back to work. So we need to take note of the cost to the economy in terms of lost hours and productivity. One way in which this can be responded to is in terms of emergency trauma support, support, which is what we call a needs assessment that leads to emergency response or intervention. In other words, that means, in layman's terms, me coming onto a crime scene, working with a victim of crime, speaking to them, calming them down, giving them parental reassurance, explaining to them how trauma affects them, getting their information, and passing that information on to people further up on the model. In other words, referring them to psychologists, to trauma counselors, making sure that they don't fall through the gap, that they're part of the system. Which leads us to the second point, the preventive brief interventions. Ensuring that we have sufficient people trained to offer trauma counseling 2 days after the event, and then leading on to early clinical interventions. In conclusion, if we want to respond effectively to the problem of victims of crime and the effect that trauma has on people, there needs to be a greater working together of organizations such as the South African Institute of Traumatic Stress, other trauma support organizations, your academics, politicians, organizations such as the National Civil Safety and Security Action Group. And we need to continue establishing trauma response teams. Every school, every bank, every organization, every little company needs to have these trauma response teams, people who have been trained and understand what trauma is, lay people. Because I found that with working with emergency services personnel and with the police, when they are empowered, when they have the knowledge, they're more likely to do the job better in terms of that unseen trauma management. Most police officers have got, do we have any police officers here? They've got hard heads and they don't want to listen to some psychologist, but they'll listen to their colleague who's done some training because they feel comfortable with it. There needs to be the ongoing training of trauma response teams. There needs to be a standardization of data capturing. The statistics we see on the South African Police Services website and the reality of the ground, there's a huge divide. There's a big gap. We know that. There needs to be a national referral database so that people know who can I go to, who specializes in trauma, who specializes in dealing with trauma and traumatic stress, who can I go see. And most importantly, there needs to be minimum standards. We've had people come onto scenes, they've put on a reflective jacket, and they've just said to a person who's just lost somebody, don't worry, it's going to be okay. I don't know about you, but that's the last thing I want to hear from somebody when I've just lost my car, my house, or some member of my family. So there needs to be minimum standards for frontline workers in trauma support. If we do that, if we can, every region, locally, provincially, nationally, if we can begin training up these teams of response team members within 10 to 15 years, we will change the effect of the violence that we in our country have been experiencing, not for the last 15 years, the last 50 years. We can change that. Thank you.